Betty stood in front of the mirror, staring at what she had become, a shadow of the woman she once was. Her face was covered in bruises, reminders of the slaps and beatings from her husband, Philip. A tear slipped down her cheek. "Mommy, are you crying?" Zara, their only child, stood in the doorway, her small eyes filled with worry. Betty quickly wiped her tears and turned to face her daughter, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "No, sweetheart," she said softly. "Mommy's just tired." Zara wasn't convinced. At only 6 years old, she had already learned to recognize the sadness in her mother's face, the way she flinched at loud noises, the way she covered the bruises with long sleeves and scarves. Zara stepped closer, reaching up with her tiny hands to touch the dark purple mark on Betty's cheek. "Did Daddy do this again? Mommy, why are we staying? Daddy is a bad man." Betty's throat tightened. She found herself lying again to her daughter, to protect her from the truth. "Zara, I've told you, anytime me and Daddy are having a conversation, you should stay in your room and lock the door until I come and get you. Your daddy is not a bad person. Trust me, he will definitely come around." "Mommy, but I am scared." Betty knelt down, cupping her daughter's face in her hands. "Listen to me, baby," she whispered. "No matter what happens, I love you and I'll always be here for you. You understand?" Zara nodded slowly. But before she could say anything, they heard the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. The air in the room changed. Betty felt it, and so did Zara. Philip was awake, and he hated waking up without his wife by his side. Betty quickly straightened up and ushered Zara toward the door. "Go to your room now," she whispered urgently. Zara hesitated for only a second before obeying, disappearing to her room just as the bedroom door swung shut. Philip stood in the doorway, his eyes cold, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. "What the hell are you doing?" he muttered, his voice thick with sleep. Betty lowered her gaze. "Nothing, I was just..." His hand flew to her face. The force of his hand sent her stumbling against the dresser. She let out a scream, covering her face. Philip exhaled sharply, as if irritated by his own actions. "Don't make me late for work," he said flatly before turning away. Moments later, Betty heard the front door slam. Betty stayed where she was, her cheek burning, her heart pounding. With shaky legs, she dragged herself to the kitchen and began preparing breakfast for the family. A simple meal of toasted bread and tea. Within a few minutes, she placed the food on the dining table and went to get Zara. By the time she returned, Philip was already seated, munching on his breakfast. They ate in silence, the air heavy with unspoken words. Soon he was done. Without a word of thanks, he grabbed his office bag and car keys, then stepped out of the house for work. Betty let out a quiet breath of relief. She then prepared Zara for school, helping her dress before walking her to the school bus. Watching the bus disappear down the street, she felt a pang of guilt. She wanted more for her daughter, a life free from fear. Back inside, Betty sat alone in the big, empty mansion, memories of her former life flashing before her eyes. They say marriage can make or break a person. Hers had shattered her. Before she married Philip, she had been everything a man could want in a wife. Educated, independent, with a promising career. She had a good life, one she had built for herself. Then she met Philip. The signs hadn't been there. Not at first. Their long-distance relationship had made it easy to miss the cracks. Philip lived in Lagos while she was in Ibadan. The distance had masked his true nature. They dated for a few months before Philip proposed. Back then, she had been overjoyed. Now she wished she had seen the truth before it was too late. It all started when she was pregnant with their first child, Zara. Philip had thrown a grand party in her honor, celebrating the pregnancy with friends and family. Betty had been over the moon, believing she had married a man who cherished her. But that night, after the guests had left and the house had fallen silent, Philip called her over for a conversation. "I want you to stop working, Betty," he said. At first, it sounded like concern, like he was trying to make her pregnancy easier. Betty smiled, touched by what she thought was his care. "Oh, baby," she chuckled. "I know you have my best interests at heart, but I can't just stop working. I've devoted so much to my career to walk away now." Philip's expression darkened. "I'm your husband and I don't want you to work. I'll place you on a salary and you'll stay at home." Betty blinked, her smile fading. "But I can't stay in this big house alone. I'll go crazy." His voice sharpened, irritation creeping in. She sighed, sensing his mood shift. "Please, I've had a long day. Can we talk about this another time?" But then it happened. Philip lost his cool. Without warning, he shoved her back onto the sofa and slapped her across the face. Betty gasped, her cheek burning. "Are you stupid?" he spat. "Do I look foolish to you? I said you won't work anymore, and that's final." She sat there, too shocked to react. What had just happened felt like a scene from a movie, something unreal, impossible. But the sting on her face told her otherwise, and it had all happened too fast. Betty sat frozen, her hand slowly moving to her stinging cheek. Her mind struggled to process what had just happened. Did Philip just hit me? Her heart pounded violently in her chest. She stared at him, searching his face for some sign of regret, an apology, anything to tell her this was a mistake. But there was nothing. Philip stood over her, his expression cold. His jaw clenched in irritation, as if she had done something wrong. Was he drunk? She tried to convince herself that maybe he had too much to drink at the party. Maybe this wasn't really him. "Philip," her voice was barely above a whisper. You hit me." "So what?" he scoffed, rolling his eyes. "You were being disrespectful." Betty's mouth fell open. "Disrespectful?" she echoed in disbelief. "I'm your husband, Betty. I make the rules in this house." He exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face like she was exhausting him. "Look, I don't want to argue. Just do what I say and things will be fine." She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Just do what I say. As if she were a child, as if she had no thoughts, no dreams, no say in her own life. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she forced them back. Philip sighed, his voice softening slightly. "It's for the best, babe. You'll see. You don't have to stress yourself working anymore. Just focus on the baby and taking care of the home." He leaned down, grabbing her chin roughly and tilting her face up to meet his eyes. "You understand me." Betty swallowed hard and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Good," he said, releasing her and stepping back. "Now go to bed. We're done talking." With that, he walked away, leaving her sitting there, numb and shaken. The next morning, Betty had prepared for work, despite Philip's demands. She refused to let last night's incident change her decision. She had spent years building her career, and she wasn't going to throw it all away just because her husband suddenly decided she shouldn't work. Dressed in a crisp blouse and skirt, she stepped out of the bedroom, heading toward the dining table for breakfast. Philip was already seated, sipping his tea. His eyes flicked up, narrowing the moment he saw her. "What are you wearing?" His voice was dangerously calm. Betty swallowed but kept her chin up. "I'm dressed for work." "Oh, really?" He let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Before she could react, he grabbed his cup and threw the scalding tea at her. A sharp scream tore from her throat as the burning liquid splashed across her chest. The pain was instant, searing through her skin. She stumbled back, clutching herself. "Are you crazy?" Philip roared, slamming the empty cup onto the table. "Didn't I tell you that you will no longer work?" Betty barely had time to process what was happening before he stood up, fury blazing in his eyes. With a swift motion, he yanked his belt from his trousers. Her breath caught in her throat. "Philip, please." But the first lash struck before she could finish. A sharp crack filled the air as the leather belt sliced across her arm. She cried out, stumbling backward. "Please, please stop," she begged, raising her hands in defense, but he didn't stop. He towered over her, rage contorting his face as he struck again and again. Betty collapsed onto the floor, shielding herself as best as she could, sobs racking her body. She couldn't believe this was happening. The man she had once loved was beating her like an animal. In that moment, as the pain tore through her, one terrifying thought consumed her mind. Is this what he had become? She lay there in pain, her body aching from the lashes, her skin raw where the belt had struck. The room spun around her as she clutched her bruised arms. Silent tears streamed down her face. Philip had left for work as if nothing had happened, leaving her crumpled on the floor, drowning in shame and confusion. Everything was happening too fast, and she didn't know what to do. She couldn't even think. Was Philip just having a rough day? Was that why he snapped? The questions swirled in her mind, but no answer could justify what he had done. She was too shocked to decide what to do next. That night, Philip returned home with flowers, expensive clothes, and chocolates. Betty's stomach twisted at the sight of him. Her body tensed as he approached. "Baby, I'm sorry," he whispered, kneeling beside her. His voice suddenly soft, almost tender. He held out the flowers, his gaze pleading. Betty turned away, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "Philip, please." Her voice was weak, exhausted. "I don't know what came over me," he said, inching closer. "I swear it won't happen again." He pressed the flowers into her hands, forcing her to take them. His fingers gently brushed over hers, and for a fleeting moment, he looked like the man she had fallen in love with. Against her better judgment, she let him hold her. That night, the love-making was fierce, almost desperate. Philip kissed every inch of her bruised skin, whispering how much he loved her. But the pain never left, and neither did the fear. Slowly it happened again and again. The first slap, then a punch, then the belt. At first, he would always beg afterward, bringing gifts, whispering apologies. And every time Betty forgave him. But soon it became a daily habit. He no longer bothered to say sorry. He no longer tried to make up for it. Even when she lost their second child to a miscarriage because of his abuse, Philip barely reacted. Betty lay in a hospital bed, hollow and broken. Her body still recovering from the trauma of losing a baby she would never hold. Philip sat beside her, scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging her pain. And even after everything, he grew worse. Betty lost herself completely. Her self-esteem shattered, her voice silenced. She made excuses for him, telling herself he was just stressed, that he didn't mean to hurt her. She prayed endlessly, hoping for a miracle, for the man she once loved to return. But the nightmare only deepened. Now, as she sat in the empty mansion, a house that once felt like home but had long since turned into a place of torment, she stared at the clock. The hours slipped away too quickly, yet the days felt endless. With a deep sigh, she pushed herself up and headed to the kitchen. She prepared lunch in silence, her mind numb, her movements mechanical. Afterward, she did some laundry. The rhythmic scrubbing of fabric was the only sound in the vast, lonely house.